and that was the ouster of Pam Bondi as Attorney General by President Donald Trump. And for a little more in-depth discussion on that particular topic, we bring in Dr. Cayce Myers from Virginia Tech University. Dr. Myers has been with us on the program before. We are delighted to have him back. Dr. Myers, how are you today on this Friday?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. And I would love to start here. Now that Pam Bondi is officially moving on, what would you say is her legacy as head of the Justice Department, as Attorney General of the United States?
Well, I would say that part of it has to do with, I think, the intense political environment in Washington. She certainly had many challenges, I think, coming into the job. I think that she's been under a lot of scrutiny and a lot of criticism by Democrats. I think that that's going to continue going on into the midterm elections. I think that she also was brought in with the kind of the thought that she would be a good pick because she was part of Trump's team. She was a MAGA supporter. She was somebody that was reliable and had a good working relationship with President Trump. There seems to have been kind of a parting of ways, I think, in terms of maybe what the Trump administration and President Trump wanted her to do. But again, she came in, I think, with the kind of the I think as a almost a reset from the first term where we saw a lot of people have a little bit more acrimonious relationships with the president and kind of a little bit more acrimonious departures. So again, I think her legacy is going to be framed around our highly polarized times.
As so many legacies are in sort of the modern political landscape. You mentioned the immense amount of challenges that she had going into this job. Could you maybe give a summary? If you were to pinpoint two or three of sort of those headline challenges that she knew she would have to handle, what do you kind of look at as the most important pillars of what she tackled during her time or tried to tackle?
Well, I think the big political issue that she was dealing with and ultimately may have resulted in some of the criticisms that she's received from conservatives. There also, we've heard reports that there's criticisms within the Trump administration of her handling of the Epstein files and just all of the kind of sensational content around that and also the kind of the political fallout around that. And that seems to have been the focus of a lot of her time, at least public facing, answering questions around that. And also, I think that that's going to be something that kind of carries with her going in the future. We've heard Democrats yesterday on social media and elsewhere really talking about how they want to have questions answered, that she's been, even though she's gone, they're still going to ask questions. They may be holding hearings. And so, again, all of this is in the backdrop of the midterm election that's coming up. And should the House of Representatives go Democratic after the election, you may see hearings and testimony around Epstein that may involve Pam Bondi having to testify. Again, I think that's the biggest issue. The other issue I think she dealt with was coming into just a hyper polarized environment. Her confirmation was very polarized in terms of just the breakdown and between Republicans and Democrats and their support for her. And she also, I think, faced a lot of criticism from Democrats and a few Republicans too, if you look at it kind of in a larger perspective. So I think that would be her defining legacy over the time that she's been in that position.
And a lot of people, a lot of the reporting that I have been reading when talking about the job she did and sort of the changes to the Justice Department that she brought. Sort of the physical symbol of this is the large portrait of President Trump that was hung over the wall of the Justice Department building. And then underneath the surface, maybe there were some more tangible actions that were taken to sort of I guess, bring the president and the Justice Department a little closer to maybe shorten that arm of independence that has existed more frequently in past administrations. Is that something that you observed as well? Is that something that you saw happening? And maybe what are some of the clues that we can look at to say, oh yes, this is potentially a real thing that did happen during her time?
So I think that that's really one of the touch points of the larger conversation that was going on politically around her. And, during the confirmation, a lot of Democrats have criticized her for her seeming support and closeness with the president. I think that they also, if you think about back to the first Trump term and his Justice Department and his attorney generals and some of the relationships that they had, a little bit more acrimonious at times, and also and in that era, you saw people departing, even in many different cabinet posts and White House positions in a little bit more acrimonious way. So I think the second term was really kind of centered around, having a lot more continuity and kind of calmness and bringing in people that were supporters of the president. And so she was brought in with a lot of talk around her ability to kind of represent the president's agenda. And I think that may be also one of the reasons why this departure is surprising, that, a former supporter or a supporter, not a former supporter, but a supporter of the president was removed from their cabinet position after he had some problems with the way that she was doing the job, allegedly. So again, we don't really know what those behind the scenes conversations were, but reports do say that the president had grown increasingly critical of several things that she's done. And this is also the kind of the second departure in a very short period of time of a high profile administration official, with Christine Home also departing. So again, how that closeness works versus what's the agenda for the president, I think that's very important. And also the optics of how she's doing the job and how other people within the MAGA base and Republican Party kind of viewed her as how well she was carrying out the agenda, I think kind of plays a part in all of this.
A couple things I want to touch on from that answer there. You mentioned optics. When we look at her last major public facing events, when she had that hearing and was combative with members of Congress, raising her voice at times, even some name calling, do you think that had any impact on this decision?
I don't know if it had any impact, but I think it certainly signals the environment in which he was operating. I mean, hyper polarized environment, hyper partisan environment. Now, that's not the first time that someone has gone in front of Congress and had a kind of a heated exchange. It's certainly not the first time in the Trump administration or prior administrations. And so that's something we do see. But we also know that there is an optics to all of that, and also an articulation of the president's message and the administration's agenda that goes into these highly watched, televised proceedings. And so one of the things that I think they are mindful of is how well can a person articulate the president's message, and also how does that play in the larger kind of political environment. And, 2026 is a midterm election. It can be a consequential election, particularly if there's a change in leadership in Congress, in the House, and potentially the Senate as well. But again, I think all of that factors into this larger assessment of, okay, what are we going to do, particularly in a time where President Trump has had a lot of challenges and lowered approval ratings on some issues that were actually some of his political strengths in 2024.
If we look at that, the timing of it and what you spoke to about those low approval ratings, especially around the war in Iran. The president has an address to the nation. He indicates in that address that 2 to 3 more weeks at least of war are sort of in the plans here in the Middle East. The next day, the stock market has sort of a negative reaction to that. In the past, the president has been sensitive to the stock market. I wonder if, when you look at the timing of this, do you think that there was purpose there, or do you think this is something that is a separate part of his agenda?
Well, I think that there's certain timing, certainly, that went along with this. I don't know that it interacts with his speech around the intervention in Iran, and I don't know that it relates to the stock market, but I think it relates to kind of a larger issue. You notice the messaging yesterday from President Trump when he posted about this was pretty conciliatory toward Bondi and complimentary. And so you see messaging coming out that is trying to kind of present this as a smooth transition and something that has sort of mutually agreed upon kind of departure. Not so sure that that's the case, but at least that's the messaging around it. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I think that what he's trying to signal is sort of a friendlier departure, and particularly in context of what we saw back in 2016 to 2020, where there were departures that were maybe more acrimonious, more clash of personalities, that kind of symbolized maybe a friction within the administration and within the president's agenda. Again, I think that the other thing is that this is happening in the spring. By the time the midterms come around in the fall, I don't know that this is going to be a top of mind issue. I do think it's going to be a topic, however, that Democrats will seize upon in some of their campaign messaging, and we saw that already yesterday in some of those social posts that were coming out.
And to your point, I've got the Truth Social post up from President Trump here, calling Pam Bondi a great American patriot, a loyal friend. She faithfully served, like you said, effusive in his praise for someone who he just fired for the most part. I'm wondering, and sometimes we can read too much into these sorts of things. You mentioned Kristi Noem. When she was let go, she was moved into a new government position. Pam Bondi transitioning to the private sector. Is there any use in reading into that, the difference there?
That may be a difference based on the individual's preference of what they want to do in the future. I think that the language, though, around that Truth Social post is what one would expect in a political environment where, even though this is a removal of someone from their position, or they're no longer going to be, or they've fallen out of favor or whatever, that maybe there is still that kind of personal friendship, but not a support for the job they're doing. But in the way that they are articulating it, I think it is meant to really emphasize continuity and to minimize this sort of perception of infighting. And like I said, I think that there has been in the past, and not just with President Trump, but with other administrations as well, when there's a departure of a cabinet level official, there's always the question of, okay, where's their dissent within the ranks, or is there some sort of tension within the cabinet between a cabinet member and the president? And so I think that this is all articulated around to create kind of a narrative of this is a transition. What he didn't say in there is who's going to take over after her on a permanent basis. We know that there's an acting AG, but we don't know who the next nominee may be, and there's a lot of speculation around that. And so that's going to be, I think, something to watch for, particularly as we've seen a lot of conversations around, transitions in the Trump administration with different positions. And we had a lot of conversation around that last year and early this year around the Fed chair. So again, this is something that is a politically significant event, and it's going to be something that we're going to be hearing about, I think, in the future for a while at least.
And Todd Blanche will take over for the time being. And then I have personally, in reporting, especially from the Associated Press and from CNN as well, seen the Environmental Protection Agency Director Lee Zeldin rumored to be very high up in the running for that position to take over as Attorney General. Anything about his resume, his role, and what he has been in this administration that you want to elaborate on, that could tell us about his potential as Attorney General and maybe what his leadership would look like?
Yeah, so I've heard that as well, and there's a lot of conversation online and in media outlets around Zeldin. Zeldin is a Trump supporter. He's been in a position where he supported the president on numerous issues. He has MAGA sort of support, I think. One of the things about him, though, that I think will be interesting, and particularly the timing of the nomination. If you go through a Senate confirmation, how acrimonious of a process is that going to be? And we've seen that, with some of these cabinet officials and others really get into an acrimonious or kind of razor thin vote. And a lot of questions around certain aspects of the Trump agenda and the Trump administration. I think, again, like we talked about, Epstein files is some of it, but some of it is also, certain, measures that the DOJ is taking and initiatives that they're taking. Zeldin also, I think, though, is seasoned in that kind of scrutiny. And so again, he's one of the names. But if you look online, you'll see others as well. And again, this is going to be interesting to see how fast that name comes out, that nominee comes out as well, because certainly there will be a lot of talk around that and political posturing and obviously some political criticism, particularly from Democrats. So again, that's really one of those things we're going to watch closely for.
Excellent, excellent. And I'm wondering, while we have you here, since we're fortunate enough to have you on the program, anything about President Trump's address to the nation that stood out to you that maybe the average person viewing maybe missed or didn't pay as much attention to? I know we brought you on to talk about Pam Bondi, but since we have you here, anything at all that you want to spotlight about that address?
I think that address is really about political positioning and the point of the intervention in Iran and some of the sort of one is the duration about the Iranian intervention. One of the things that we've seen here is with the military action in Iran, a real question as around, how long does this last? And a lot of people obviously seeing that through the prism of Iraq and Afghanistan, which were these long multi-year wars. And so I think that he's trying to position away from that. I also found it very interesting, some of the kind of the subtext of that speech as it relates to our allies and what his expectations for them are going forward. And I think certainly they were watching that as well. And again, this is an international issue, but it's tied into these larger issues around elections as well. So we know in 2026, the big topic for everybody is affordability. And if gas goes up, there's a kind of a trickle down effect of that to other prices of goods and services. And so, there's a messaging around that as well that I think that the president and his administration are trying to do. I think quite a significant speech and something that we'll see how it unfolds going forward in terms of those durational timelines. But again, something that we're going to hear more about in the months to come.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Cayce Myers, no one better to break it down than you. Is there anything else you want to add about what we've talked about today?
Well, I think that the last thing I would say is that this is a big moving political issue with the administration shakeup and also with the administration's involvement in Iran, and particularly in a midterm election here. These are the things that are going to matter, and you're going to see a lot of messaging and advertising and criticism around this going into 2026, particularly on the Democratic side.
Very good. We appreciate it, Dr. Myers. I'm sure we'll request that you come on again in the lead up to that election to talk more of the headlines that are continue to come as we move throughout this second term of President Donald Trump. Dr. Cayce Myers from Virginia Tech University, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.